This is a sad morning here at Today.
After more than 20 years on one of the highest rated news shows in America, there are few names bigger than Matt Lauer.
Breaking news overnight, Matt Lauer has been terminated from NBC News.
For several weeks, the New York Times has been working on an investigation.
The list now stretches from Roger Ailes to Bill O'Reilly, Mark Halperin, Charlie Rose, and more. Their colleagues, usually women, left in the uneasy position of announcing on air the firing of someone they know well.
Charlie does not get a pass here.
And it's not just an American phenomenon. Recently in Quebec, high-profile host Eric Salvaille has stepped back after La Presse reported allegations against him. And in 2014, one of the best-known radio hosts in Canada, Jian Ghomeshi, was fired by CBC amidst allegations of sexual harassment and assault.
Well, the CBC has announced that its relationship with Jian Ghomeshi has come to an end.
Lauer's co-host Savannah Guthrie, while acknowledging it's awkward, pointed to the need for journalists to cover these stories as any other.
We will be covering this story as reporters, as journalists. I'm sure we will be learning more details in the hours and days to come.
So how do journalists keep themselves objective while reporting on their own employer, even their own colleagues? Gillian Findlay is an investigative reporter with the Fifth Estate who held the CBC to account for its handling of the Ghomeshi allegations.
So let's talk about that. What was your reaction when you got that assignment?
Well, I didn't get the assignment. I asked for the assignment because this was a story that when the Toronto Star and Jesse Brown, who was the reporter who did much of the legwork, when it broke, it obviously was a huge story. And for the first couple of days, there was silence from the CBC. And I talked to my colleagues and we said, you know, we are allegedly the premier investigative show that the CBC has. If this was another industry, even another broadcast entity, we would be taking a look at this. So why aren't we doing that here? And that conversation sparked the investigation that ultimately a few weeks later ended up in the piece that we did.
In investigative work that you and I have both been involved in the years, I mean, there are people within the group that know what you're working on, but there's secrecy around it. We don't telegraph to everyone in the building what we're doing. Did you have to do anything more to keep quiet what you were looking into?
Yes, we did. I mean, it was a very small circle of people on the show that worked on it, and we all agreed that we would not talk beyond that small circle, and that was, you know, at some point other people do have to know, and in fact, at some point our senior bosses have to know what's coming. And
because they didn't initially, right?
They didn't
it was
initially.
within the show.
They didn't initially, and then, you know, we sort of strategized, and we understood that at some point in fairness, we had to tell them what was coming, and that was a very interesting moment because we didn't know what the reaction would be. Would self-interest take over? Would people want to come into the edit suite and see what we have and comment about what we have? And I will say it is to this organization's, I think, everlasting credit that none of that happened. We told them, we gave them a briefing. A person who was not involved in any of, certainly not in the story and hadn't been involved with our research, came in and vetted, but the understanding was they were vetting just to be able to prepare themselves for what the fallout might be. They did not have the right to change anything, and they didn't. And the piece went to air.
Is it inherently weird? I mean, we do stories about people that we don't know, people that we are aware of, familiar with, but this is someone who was in the building, and whether you knew Jian personally or not, you knew who he was. The people you're holding to account in a story are in some cases your superiors. Was it odd, awkward?
It wasn't odd because I didn't know Jian, and so in some ways that part was easier for me. It was obviously more awkward given when we turned our attention to what the CBC knew and who knew and what they did with that information when they had it. And they weren't my immediate superiors, but they were clearly in the management level that ultimately controls journalism in this building. Yes, it was odd. What do you do is, I think, what we grappled with. And I think it wasn't a hard conversation. It wasn't a long debate. It was actually quite simple. We just agreed that we do our job. We have to do our job because once we telegraph that there is a story here to be told, we are going to be watched. We are going to be scrutinized, you know. So are
Did
you pulling
feel
your
that
punches?
pressure, knowing that people were going to be
Absolutely.
really looking at the questions
Absolutely.
you asked, how aggressive you were?
Absolutely. We not that anybody said that, but we instinctively knew that, you know, we were going to have to be seen as being as aggressive with them as we would have been with anybody else on any other kind of story. I think the other thing, if I can say, that helped in that regard is we're a public corporation. We are a Crown corporation, and we are responsible to the people of Canada ultimately. If we had been a private corporation, and I've had friends of mine at newspapers and other private networks say, you know, we would never have been allowed to do that kind of investigation where we were. I think it helped us that we are responsible to the people of Canada, because that's ultimately who we had to serve. It didn't matter whether, you know, the upper management of the CBC was pissed off or not. At the end of the day, we had a higher purpose in a way, and I think that also fueled us through this. It helped.
Thanks for talking about it.
Thanks.